So this is the gauge. I'm in the process of making a few changes, but there's like a ring of LED lights around here as well. And then how it works is on the back, there's these one port for power, so that's what this is, and then 4 ports for the independent sensors. So I have a coolant or oil temperature sensor here, a pressure sensor, so like oil pressure, fuel pressure you can use for that, and then a sensor for boost as well. And so later on I'll be working to like add additional sensors, but these are kind of like the main ones that most people use. So there's 4 ports here for those sensors, and then you can plug up to 4 of them in at a time. And then this 5th port here is for any like additional add-on things that I end up adding to it. So the OBD2 adapter, which I'm still working on, plugs into that bottom port and then also has power, which is nice for OBD2. So it's like plug and play. This is right into the port and then this into the gauge. And so that's kind of the ports that it has on the back. And then it has these 2 buttons on the side. And so these are right now the buttons are used just to enter into the like settings mode. And so this is how you can configure the gauge, change how it looks and what's showing up on there. Yeah, so how the settings mode works is it has a Wi-Fi network on the gauge, and so you connect to it with your phone. Once you connect to it, it shows a QR code. You go ahead and scan that. And so you scan the QR code, and then that will take you to a web page where you can configure everything. And so this is like the configuration for the gauge. This 67 is like what the sensor is reading right now. So it's like constantly streaming. And then you can go and customize to show like a analog gauge face. And so I'll save that and reset the gauge, turn the settings mode off. And then now it's showing like an analog gauge face. So you can see the LED lights there. Those kind of like follow the needle as well. And then that's where you can add a bunch of different sensors and change whatever other settings you have for that. Yeah, the other cool thing is like, especially for like temperature or some of the other ones, is you can set up like a high temp warning. And so when the temperature goes over whatever warning you have, all the LEDs will like turn red. It also has a buzzer in this one. And so like it'll like buzz at you and change the like color of the gauge face. So I've tried to make it like as obvious as possible if like something's wrong by like using all of that stuff. So kind of my philosophy with the design there is like with those like warnings, you like don't want to be reading a number or even like looking at like where the needle is. And so I want you to just be able to like visually see like this thing is like bright red flashing, buzzing at me, like something's wrong. I need to like do a cool down lap or like something like that. And so like you really don't even need to read what's on the gauge. You just need to like see that, oh, it's different now, like the color's different. And so then that will be more obvious than having to read like a number of like 205 or whatever. So
do all the sensors and stuff come with in the kit with it, or do you just order it however you plan on setting it up?
Yeah, so right now the way I'm selling it is like you'll buy the gauge on its own, and then each sensor you'll like purchase separately. The other thing that you can do with it as well is I've set it up so that you can configure like a custom sensor. So there's a bunch of sensors that I don't have support for yet, but all of the ones that are like 5-volt analog, like linear sensors, where it just gives you like a 0 to 5-volt output, you can set up with this gauge. And so there's like a bunch of other like random like pressure sensors or things like that. Or even if you have like a 5-volt output from your ECU, analog output, you can like plug it into this gauge and then display like whatever value you want there. So I want to set it up so you can end up using any sensor you want and use this as the display. I'm still working on like the resistance map sensors, but that'll come soon, again with like a software update. And then I'll sell the harnesses also so that you can just like hook up whatever sensor you want to it. But but I have all the connectors listed and stuff like that online. So, you know, the harnesses will be cheap, but if you want to make your own, you can as well.
So if you got most, like all the other sensors, then because you have all the plugs on the back, can you have it set for like multiple things and like switch between them?
So right now, the way it works is it will display up to 4 sensors on the display at once. I have ideas around like displaying one at a time, or like switching through, or only showing one or changing to one if like, you know, it's a high temp warning or something like that. But right now it displays 4 all at once, up to 4. Yeah, so this is the display for when it shows
cool.
4.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, how I have it set up in my car is I have like one gauge for oil pressure and oil temp, and then another one for coolant temp. And so it's kind of nice having like one gauge just for the oil stuff, one gauge for coolant, and like, you know, another gauge for AFR or something like that. And then the other thing that's kind of cool is I think like Subarus or something like that, like, or even some BMWs, they have OBD2, but they're, I think their like oil temp sensor is just like a switch, so like on or off, or maybe it's the coolant temp sensor. But what you could do with this is like, you can have stuff reading from OBD2 and from an independent sensor. So if like your car doesn't have like an accurate coolant temp in OBD2, you can like add the independent sensor just for that and then display like them all together here. The other thing I want to add to it too is I want to create like a marketplace of like gauge faces. And so I've kind of experimented with this a little bit on my site, where you can like download gauge face packs, and then you can just upload it directly to the gauge and then select whatever you wanted there. Eventually that could be a good way to like, I don't know, bring in more artists or things like that. They could even like sell them if they wanted, or just do them for free. But yeah, I think that's kind of a cool opportunity there. And then the other thing that I'm excited to is like, yeah, I mean, like the whole tagline is like the most customizable automotive gauge. And so like the screen and like color of the LEDs and all of that stuff is super customizable right now, but like the actual case is not. And so that's like one of the next things that I want to start adding on as well. And so this was like a version that my manufacturer made of like a chrome bezel. And so being able to, you can like swap out the bezels and then use like whatever colors you want, sell different bezel colors and things like that as well. And then the other thing that I'll be doing as well is like releasing the STL models for this. So if anybody wants to like 3D print their own or that kind of thing, they could do that as well. And then like kind of design whatever else they wanted. Yeah, one of my like big inspirations is both like Sony and Casio in like the early 2000s, I would say. They both like just went crazy with like creating, you know, they have like, Sony has like a Walkman, but then they have like 50 different versions of a Walkman that are all like different styles and like playing into different niches and stuff like that. And so like, I'd love to get to a point where I can have like these different bezels that are like, you know, a bunch of different styles to match people's interiors or just like whatever vibe they want to like have. I think that would be super cool. And also like create a community where it's like people can create their own and then like put it up for like other people to download or, you know, like whatever. So yeah, that's kind of my goal with the like customizability piece. And then what's interesting is, so like, I'm not a diesel guy or anything like that, but I know like boost is like way higher on diesel trucks. And so what I've had some people do is they'll use the oil pressure, this pressure gauge, because it goes up to 150 PSI, and they'll use this as the like boost gauge because you don't need vacuum on diesel.
Yeah.
And so you just need the pressure. And so then they've used this for their boost gauge, and then they can go like way higher for PSI. One other cool thing with the concept of the gauge is like, you can like take this gauge and then take it with you like between cars. And so because it works like pre-OBD2 cars plus OBD2 plus CAN bus, it's like kind of your whole life cycle of like getting into cars. You can like have it when you're like just starting out and you like install a coolant temp sensor and, you know, have it just as that. And then maybe you like buy a newer car that has OBD2, then you like pop it in, have the OBD2 sensor or the adapter. And then if you get like more advanced with like a, you know, aftermarket ECU, then you have like the CAN bus adapter that you can plug into it. So like the one gauge can then hop between like coolant temp to RPM to like oil pressure, like whatever else you want to show on it. So yeah, I can kind of like stick with you throughout like all your cars. For the first production pre-order, it's going to be 150 for the gauge, and then each sensor will be like 30 bucks each. From what I've seen, really the other products, like there's no product that puts like all of it together right now. Like there's CAN bus gauges, there's OBD2 gauges, there's like independent sensor gauges, but none of them have it all. And then even like the cheapest CAN bus gauge I can find is like 300 bucks. And like OBD2 gauges are super expensive also. You can buy really cheap like gauges that go to, you know, like a coolant temp sensor or whatever on Amazon. But then they won't have like all the customizability and like all of that stuff. I'm like a pretty frugal guy. I like deals and like stuff like that. So I wanted to make something that was like decently priced and you like got a lot of value from it. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know, my philosophy with it.